The morning after my granddaughter's birthday party, I stood in my son's driveway in Burlington, staring at a stack of empty gift bags, blowing across the lawn like nothing had happened at all. 24 hours earlier, my granddaughter Felicity had sat on the porch steps in her good dress, watching her cousins rip open box after box, and she hadn't said a single word. She just folded her hands in her lap and watched. I keep coming back to her face. Not sad exactly. Confused. Like she was trying to work out a math problem nobody had taught her how to solve. I didn't say anything that night either. I drove home to Oakville with my hands tight on the wheel, and I didn't say a word until I got Felicity's mother on the phone 2 hours later. But the next morning, at 8:30, I said everything. And when I was done, 62 years of my family pretending to be something we weren't came apart like wet paper. Not because I yelled. I have never once raised my voice at my own son, but because for the first time in my life, I stopped being quiet, and I stopped being convenient, and I finally did the math. My name is Vivienne Castellan. I am 58 years old. I live outside Oakville, Ontario, and for 30-some years I was the person this family called on whenever something needed fixing. This is the story of the last thing I ever fixed for free. I grew up in Hamilton, the younger of 2 girls, raised by my father after my mother passed when I was 9. My older sister Pauline got the soft version of him. The version that laughed easily and forgave quickly. By the time I came along he'd hardened up some, and I think I absorbed that hardness and turned it into usefulness. Because usefulness was the only currency that ever bought me any warmth in that house. Pauline got told she was beautiful. I got told I was capable. I used to think capable was a compliment. It took me about 4 decades to understand. It was a job description nobody ever paid me for. I married young, had my son Holden at 24, and built a small bookkeeping practice out of our spare room that eventually grew into an actual office on Lakeshore with 3 employees. And a parking spot with my name stenciled on it. I am good with numbers. I have always been good with numbers. It's the one part of my life that has never once lied to me. My ex-husband left when Holden was 11, and after that it was just the 2 of us. Me working 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on, and Holden growing up fast because there wasn't another option. I am not going to sit here and tell you I was a perfect mother, because I wasn't, but I will tell you I never once let that boy go without. Whatever I had, he had. That's just how I was raised to think about family. You give until there's nothing left and you don't ask why. Holden married a woman named Sloan about 9 years ago. Sloan is, I'll be fair here, not a cruel person on her own, but she comes from money. Real old Forest Hill, Toronto money. The kind where Easter brunch costs more than my first car did. And somewhere along the way she absorbed her mother's particular gift for being generous in a way that always had a hierarchy attached to it. Sloane's sister Greer has 3 kids, ages 5, 7, and 10. Holden and Sloan have Felicity, who just turned 7 herself, missing her 2 front teeth, the kind of kid who still believes adults when they tell her something is fair. For 9 years I have done their books. Not Holden and Sloane's personal finances exactly, though I've helped there too, but the family trust that Sloane's late father set up. The one that funds the cottage in Muskoka and covers tuition for all 5 grandkids. Somebody needed to manage the disbursements, track the tax implications, file the T3 returns every spring, deal with the CRA when they came sniffing around the cottage's classification as a rental property. I raised my hand. Of course I did. I was the practical one. I was the one who didn't need to be paid because, as my son once said without a trace of irony, "Mom, you'd do it for free anyway. You love this stuff." I did love it. That's the part that still stings a little. I loved being needed. I just never stopped to ask whether I was valued, and those 2 things, I have learned, are not the same animal at all. This past May, it was Felicity's 7th birthday. Sloan hosted it at their place in Etobicoke. A big spread, a bounce castle, a hired face painter, the whole production. I drove in from Oakville with a gift I'd spent 3 weeks thinking about. A real wooden dollhouse I'd had custom built by a craftsman, out near Milton, because Felicity has been obsessed with dollhouses since she was 4. It cost me $1,100 and I didn't think twice about it. When I got there, the dining room table was already covered in gifts. I noticed it the way you notice a smell before you can name it. Something slightly wrong in the air. I scanned the tags without meaning to. To Marlo, to Jasper, to Wren, Greer's 3 kids, There was a stack for them that nearly toppled when somebody bumped the table. Tablets, a gaming console, a full set of those collectible dolls that run $80 a piece. New bicycles parked in the front hall with bows still on the handlebars. I told myself there had to be a separate pile somewhere for Felicity. Maybe Sloane had it upstairs. Maybe they were saving hers for last, a surprise. I poured myself a coffee in their kitchen and I watched Felicity run around the bounce castle with her cousins, laughing, completely unaware that anything was off. At 2 o'clock, Sloane gathered everyone for gifts. For the next half hour I watched Marlo, Jasper and Ren tear through that pile. The console, the bikes, 3 of those dolls each, a whole arts and crafts tower, enough candy to put a dentist's kid through school. Felicity sat cross-legged near the coffee table the entire time, watching with this very careful, very patient attention. The way a kid watches something she's trying hard to understand. She didn't ask where hers was. She just waited. When the wrapping paper had all been swept into a garbage bag, Sloane came by with a glass of rosé in her hand and said, and I want you to hear exactly how she said it, breezy, like she was commenting on the weather. Oh, we figured your side had Felicity covered, Vivienne. You're always so on top of things. The kids really needed a bit of extra magic this year, with everything going on with Greer's divorce. She squeezed my shoulder and drifted off toward the bar cart. Felicity looked up at me. She had heard every word of it. I took her into the powder room off the front hall, and I sat down on the closed toilet lid with her on my knee. And I held myself together through sheer stubborn force, while she pressed her face into my collarbone. She wasn't crying. She was just still. This terrible kind of still. Grandma, she whispered. Did I do something wrong? Is that why I don't get presents like them? I pulled back and looked at her face, at those 2 missing front teeth, and something in me that had been bending quietly for 30 years finally just let go. I kissed her forehead. I told her she was perfect, that she had never once done a single thing wrong in her whole life, and I promised her. I actually promised her, out loud, like a vow, that this would be the last birthday anyone in this family ever made her feel like an afterthought. We left not long after. I stopped at a Shoppers Drug Mart on the way home, and bought her a sketchbook and a tin of good pencil crayons. $14 and change. She held it against her chest, the whole ride like it was made of glass. And somehow that made everything so much worse. That night, after I'd dropped her back with her parents and driven myself home, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, and a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me, and I started writing. I am not a person who makes scenes. I have never once posted an angry thing online in my life. I solve problems with documentation, with precision, with a paper trail, because that is the only language this family has ever respected from me. I pulled my old invoicing software up on the laptop. For 9 years I had managed Sloane's family trust, filing the T3s every March, handling correspondence with the trustee company, reconciling the cottage's rental income against its expenses for tax purposes, advising on the disbursement schedule for tuition, restructuring the trust's investments back in 2020 after the original advisor put them in something far too aggressive for a fund. Meant it to outlast a generation. I'd caught that one before it cost them $80,000 in a downturn. Nobody ever thanked me for it, because nobody but me ever fully understood what I'd prevented. My rate, when I bothered to bill outside clients, was $130 an hour, which is frankly modest for trust accounting work in this province. I went conservative, 100 even, blended across 9 years to account for how green I still was at the start. I logged it all, annual T3 preparation and filing, 14 hours a year, quarterly disbursement reviews and reconciliations, 20 hours each. The 2020 restructuring, 51 hours. CRA correspondence over the cottage's classification dispute in 2022, 38 hours. An absolute nightmare of a year if anyone's wondering. Miscellaneous calls and corrections averaged out 6 hours a year. When I finished totaling it, the number on the page was $111,400. $111,400 Canadian for 9 years of professional work I had given away because I was always so on top of things. Then I did something else. I pulled out the documents I'd helped Sloane's late father's lawyer draft years ago, before he passed, because I'd been the one who understood the trust's mechanics better than anyone else in the family, including, frankly, Sloane herself. I was named as the trust's financial advisor of record with the trustee company. Not the legal trustee, that was always going to be Sloan, but the one whose sign-off was required on any disbursement over $5,000. Felicity's tuition, Marlowe, Jasper and Wren's tuition, the cottage's mortgage payment, which the trust still covered. All of it ran through me first. I wasn't going to misuse that. That has never been who I am. But I was going to resign from it, formally in writing, with witnesses, and I was going to hand over my invoice at the very same time. I typed it all up that night. Itemized, documented, professional, every hour accounted for with a date and a description, because that's how I've built every invoice of my working life. I attached 9 years of supporting records. I printed 2 copies and wrote a short cover letter. I won't read you the whole thing, but the first line was, "Dear Holden and Sloan, enclosed please find an invoice for professional trust accounting services rendered over the past 9 years. I signed it, sealed it in a plain envelope, and set my alarm for 7:30. Then, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept the whole night through without waking once. I drove to Etobicoke the next morning alone. I left Felicity's sketchbook conversation for another day. This wasn't about her hearing any of it, not yet, maybe not ever in full. I wore my gray blazer, the one I wear to client meetings, not to intimidate anyone but because some mornings you need to put on your own armor just to remember who you are. Sloan opened the door in her dressing gown, surprised. "Vivienne? We weren't expecting." "I know," I said. "I need 10 minutes with both of you." Holden came down the stairs in his socks, confused but not yet alarmed. "Everything okay, Mom?" I set the envelope on their kitchen island, between the espresso machine and a bowl of fruit nobody was eating. "I need you both to open that." Sloan pulled out the invoice first. I watched her face do something complicated. What is this?" "It's an invoice," I said. 9 years of professional trust accounting and advisory work, fully itemized with documentation attached. The total comes to $111,400, billed at a rate well below my market rate. Holden's face went pale. "Mom, this is accurate," I said. "I can walk you through every line if you'd like." There was a long silence in that kitchen, the kind where you can hear the fridge humming. Sloan set the invoice down and looked at me with something I'd never once seen on her face in 9 years. Somewhere between fear and offense, like I'd broken an unspoken rule by putting a number to something she'd always assumed was by nature, the way air is free. "Your family," she said. "You did this because you love us." "I do love you," I said. "I also worked for this family, professionally, without a cent of compensation, for 9 years. While yesterday you spent close to $3,000 on Greer's children and gave my granddaughter, your daughter, absolutely nothing. Not a card. Not a $5 chocolate egg." Holden's jaw tightened the way his father's used to. "We explained that You told me," I said, looking at Sloan now, "that she didn't need the extra magic. She's 7. She sat at that table and watched her cousins open $3,500 of gifts, and then she asked me in your powder room whether she had done something wrong." Nobody said anything for a long moment. "I am not here to fight with either of you," I said. "And I'm not here to shame you, though I think yesterday deserves a long, honest look from both of you. I'm here because I've made a decision, and you deserve to hear it from me directly, not from a lawyer's letter." I pulled the second document out of the envelope. "Effective today, I am resigning as financial advisor of record on the trust. I'm withdrawing from all ongoing management. The T3 filings, the disbursement reviews, the CRA correspondence. I'd strongly recommend you retain a licensed accountant immediately, someone outside the family. I'm happy to provide a full transition file. I will not continue in this role without a proper compensated agreement going forward." Sloan's hand went to her mouth. "You can't just..." "I can," I said quietly. "I have the right, professionally and personally. What I've given this family, I gave it willingly, for years, and I don't regret the years where it came from love. But what happened yesterday is not something I am willing to carry in silence. Not for myself and certainly not for my granddaughter." I picked my purse up off the counter. The invoice isn't a demand for immediate payment. It's a record, proof of what my work was actually worth, and what this family chose never once to acknowledge. Keep it in a drawer if you want. But every time you see it, I hope you think hard about what family is actually supposed to mean. I turned toward the door. Holden said my name, and when I turned back around he looked, for the first time in I don't know how many years, genuinely shaken. Not defensive, not annoyed, shaken. Did we really make her feel like that? He asked. I said, you did, and I left. I won't pretend it felt triumphant walking out to my car. My hands shook the entire drive home on the QEW. I sat through a green light at Trafalgar for an extra few seconds, because I couldn't quite get my foot to move to the gas pedal. Change is terrifying even when every part of you knows it's right. What happened over the following weeks, though, I genuinely did not see coming. Within 2 days, Greer called me. She'd heard some version of events from Sloane. Though God only knows which version. The call started awkward and ended somewhere strange, because partway through Greer went quiet and said, "Did Sloane actually say Felicity didn't need the extra magic?" "Word for word," I told her. A long pause. "That's okay," Greer said. "I have to be honest here, because I think it matters. Greer and I have never been particularly close. The favoritism in that family shaped a lot of people in different directions. She benefited from it materially, sure. But she also grew up watching money get used as a kind of love substitute. And that does something to a person too, whether they end up on the giving or receiving end of it." She called Felicity that same week and apologized to a 7-year-old, which is more than most adults manage. She sent her one of those collectible dolls, the same kind her own kids had gotten, no occasion attached at all. About a month after the confrontation, Holden called me. He didn't apologize right away. That's not how he was raised, unfortunately. And that one's on me as much as anyone. But he asked if he could take Felicity to the Royal Ontario Museum. Just the two of them, father and daughter, anywhere she wanted to pick. She chose the dinosaur gallery, obviously. He let her get the gift shop stuffed pterodactyl she'd been eyeing online for weeks. He brought her home a bouquet of yellow tulips, because yellow is her favorite color. And he told her, in his own clumsy way, that she was his daughter, and he loved her, and he was sorry she'd ever felt like she came second to anyone. She came home and told me, very solemnly, "Daddy said sorry, and he let me get the pterodactyl with the long beak." I held it together until she went to bed that night. As for the invoice, Holden and Sloane haven't paid it, and honestly, I never expected them to. That was never really the point of writing it. The point was making visible something that had stayed invisible for 9 years. Putting an actual dollar figure on what reliable had quietly cost me. So the next time anybody in that family called me practical or self-sufficient, we'd both understand exactly what those words had historically meant. Sloane hasn't called me directly since that morning in her kitchen. I imagine she's still working through her feelings about it. And that's fair. I'm working through mine too, in my own way. I hired an outside accountant to handle the trust transition. Billed it properly. Paid in full, no family discount. For the first time in years, I'm not the person quietly managing everyone else's ledger while my own sits untouched on the kitchen table. It feels strange. It also feels, more than anything, like breathing out after holding your breath a long time. I want to be careful how I close this out, because I'm not interested in standing here pretending I've got it all figured out. I don't. I'm 58 years old and I'm still learning things about my own family I should have understood decades ago. But here's what I do know now, in my bones. The most dangerous role you can ever be handed in a family is the one labeled reliable. Reliability itself isn't the problem. Being steady, being someone people can lean on, that's a genuinely good thing to be. The problem starts the moment a family decides your reliability is a resource to be quietly extracted rather than a quality worth respecting, and frankly paying for. I spent the better part of 3 decades grateful that this family needed me. What I should have been asking the entire time was whether they valued me. Needing somebody and valuing somebody are not the same thing, not even close, and it took me far too long to learn the difference. And children, they see all of it. They feel it in a room before they have the vocabulary for it. Felicity understood the gap between herself and her cousins before she had a single word to put to it, and so she did what kids do. She turned it inward and made it about her own worth. Did I do something wrong? No child should ever have to ask that question, in any family, in any kitchen, on any birthday. The morning I drove to Etobicoke with that envelope, I wasn't only standing up for myself. I was showing Felicity, even though she wasn't in the room to see it, what it looks like to stop apologizing for your own value. I was showing her that love without any accountability attached to it isn't love at all. It's just habit dressed up in nice wrapping paper. She doesn't know all the details, and she doesn't need to, not at 7. But someday when she's grown, I want her to look back and see a grandmother who chose her dignity over everyone's comfort, mine included, when it mattered most. I want her to grow up knowing that the people who love you ought to show it equally. Every time, without conditions attached. And if they don't, she's allowed to name it out loud. She's allowed to stop being convenient for people who only ever loved her on their own terms. So I'll leave you with this. The way I've had to ask myself. Is there someone in your life who's been quietly counting on your reliability while never once stopping to value it? Someone who calls you capable or low maintenance while expecting you to carry weight they'd never carry themselves? If there is, what would it actually cost them if you simply stopped? And more than that, what has it already cost you?